Hi everyone, welcome to this channel. I'm here with Henk and I'm going to ask him a few questions. Welcome Henk.
Thank you, I'm glad to be here.
Could you start with telling us what this channel is all about? What motivated you to make all these videos about those cities?
Of course, I've been interested in history all my life and I always wondered about how they build all those beautiful buildings that are still here today, and it also made me wonder how life must have been in earlier times. They always tell us that we are at the peak of everything right now. We have never been better in history than we are now, but I dare to question that. If you see how beautiful everything was in much earlier times, then it's hard to believe that in the old days life was hard and primitive. You need a certain mindset to create something beautiful, and you can't do that when you are in survival mode.
Do you believe that our history is fake?
That was one of the questions that I asked myself, and it seemed so. From very early on I saw that there was a lot in our history books that doesn't add up, and also a lot that are just stories that are assumed to be true, but there is no shred of evidence for it. That's why I decided to look at our own history, because in this country there is still a lot left of what we call the old world. If we want to find out what our real history is, you can't rule out everything, because all there is from before 1850 are archives, renderings, and old maps. From 1850 and later, we have photos that we can study. When you look at the mainstream narrative, you can look for things that don't add up or that are very unlikely. Then you know what to research, and when you dig deeper, you can draw a conclusion whether it could be true or total nonsense. Whatever your opinion is, you should be able to substantiate it with facts and a plausible story. If you see something that you don't understand or you can't imagine how it's done, that doesn't mean that it's fake.
And what did you find? Fake or not?
I found a lot that doesn't add up, but also a lot that must be true. I think that, at least for this country, a lot of what's in our history is true, but there is also a lot adjusted to fit a certain narrative.
On the internet there are a lot of people who believe that there once was a beautiful global empire that was called Tartaria. That must have been a very advanced culture. What's your take on that, and are you a believer?
I've seen a lot of those videos on YouTube and I'm fascinated. All those people who make videos about Tartaria all see that there are things in our history that don't add up, but the argument that all the old churches, cathedral, temples, castles, and star forts are all Tartarian culture doesn't stick at all. They are right about the fact that you can find those buildings all over the globe, but that's about it. Everything else about that theory seems to be wrong. First of all, there is a distinct difference between Roman and Gothic architecture, and they were from different times. It's Old Roman from the Roman Empire, Gothic from the Middle Ages, or Renaissance Roman style, and star forts are something completely different. It doesn't seem right to attribute all of that to one culture. Second, the whole Tartaria story is based on a few released CIA documents that say that the Soviets were erasing Tartaria from their history books. That makes Tartaria very interesting, but history is written by the victors, and the Russians defeated the Tartarians, occupied their land, and were not very nice to them. And in Soviet schools the teacher teaches what the party preaches. Third, there are a lot of old maps that show Tartaria as a big empire, and that means it really existed, but there is no evidence at all that there ever was a global Tartarian empire or culture. It's just another empire that has been erased from our history books, but there is also a lot erased from our own Dutch history. There is a lot of evidence that we once were a global empire. So, it's even more likely that our hidden history is Dutch instead of Tartarian. I'm afraid the Tartarian story is being pushed to influence a certain subculture. It's a perfect way to erase your history if you can make people believe that your history is completely fake, and if you erase history, you erase identity. And look where it is situated, between Russia and China. Isn't that convenient? Do you really think our history is in fact Russian or Chinese? And it was also a very advanced technological society, and very peaceful and harmonic. Sounds like utopia. It smells like a left-wing communist agenda to me.
Is that really what you believe? Was there a global Dutch empire instead of a Tartarian empire?
No, I don't think so. I think in earlier times people thought very different than we do today. If we read the official narrative, or watch Hollywood movies or Netflix, we are supposed to believe that all ancient cultures were primitive, brutal, poor, unsophisticated, and there is always a lot of intrigue and betrayal involved, resulting in conflict, and we glorify the battles. But those are our modern ways, and that is how we are programmed to think with all those books and movies. I think we are dumbed down, we lost a lot of knowledge, and back in the days people were not as cruel as we are now, we didn't conquer and kill wherever we went. But there is something very dark and mysterious about Dutch history. We occupied huge territories all over the world, and the most mysterious about it is how small this country really is, compared to all the territories that we colonized. Some of those territories are in our history books, and others are not, and that makes it even more mysterious. But I will get into that in a later video.
These videos that you made are all about Dutch cities and their history. What are you trying to show us?
I thought, if I want to find out what's real and what's not, I should not listen to all kind of stories but do my own research, see what I can find, like historical images, maps and photos. I love old maps. And compare that with the official narrative. That raises questions, and then I dig deeper. I try to understand my own history and culture and try to imagine how people lived, what it must have been like and how they thought. In contradiction to the USA, for instance, there is still a lot left from the old world. Not just churches and government buildings, but also a lot of houses where common people lived. I decided to make a video from every capital from all the provinces, and Amsterdam, the national capital, because all these cities had an important role in history, and most of them are very old. Let the people and the buildings in the pictures tell the story, stones don't lie. A lot of these city centers still look a lot like they were hundreds of years ago, but hardly anyone sees it. We take it for granted and don't realize how old it really is. I've lived in many different places, and have been in even a lot more, and I am always amazed by how beautiful this country really is, and then again I wonder how beautiful it once must have been, before we destroyed a lot, and replaced it with all those square boxes that we call modern architecture. That's what I'm trying to show in these videos. It was beautiful and it still is, if you know where and how to look, and I don't see what Tartaria has to do with the Dutch old world. I call it Dutch.
I would be a little disappointed when it turns out that there was no global Tartarian empire. The idea was appealing to me that we once had a peaceful, loving and beautiful world. I hope you are not going to destroy my imagination or the mystery.
Oh, don't worry about that. That our history is not Tartarian doesn't mean it isn't mysterious or beautiful. It's history, and that is in the past, that means it's gone, forever. Therefore there will always be mystery. I will never claim that I have all the answers. I just try to give you an objective view on the facts and what we can prove and still see today.
Okay, and what stands out? Some say there was a reset in the 1800s, even a mud flood. Did you find any evidence for that?
Those are two different questions and hard to answer. When we talk about a mud flood, maybe in the east of the country. I once lived in an old house that once had a door and windows in the basement. The so-called mud flood windows with just a small part above the ground and the first floor 1 meter above street level. I've been wondering about that for 30 years, but the problem with the mud flood theory is that I found the same houses and windows on top of the hill, and mud doesn't flow up. That's why I have a big problem with the mud flood theory. I don't say it didn't happen, because I have seen loads of pictures from cities all over the world where cities have several layers underground, that must have been above ground in some distant past, and the flood theory might have happened there, but over here it doesn't add up. If you look at the old maps, they are very detailed and precise. All the buildings are drawn onto the maps, and a lot of these buildings are still here today and still look as they are shown on the maps, and they go back to the late 1500s. So, in my opinion, it's very unlikely that we had mud floods in this country. I might be missing something, so correct me in the comments if you think I'm wrong. But besides all that, all these old maps show city walls with canals around and through the city. These canals would be the first to flood, but they are still here, clearly visible on the aerial pictures, and these are the most beautiful places in the city where you can have a drink in the sun. It's hard to believe that they were once flooded with mud, and dug out again. And last but not least, we have hills in the east and south of the country, and there may have been a mud flood in some places, but most of the country is as flat as a pancake, and mud doesn't flow very far on a flat surface. It has to come from somewhere and go somewhere.
There goes another mystery. No disaster, so, no reset?
No mud flood over here. If it ever happened here, it must have been far before the 1400s, and even that is doubtful, but I do believe it happened in other countries. It even happens today. You can see it on the news when there has been extreme rain somewhere, part of a mountain comes down as a flood. That doesn't mean there was no reset, but first of all we have to define what a reset really is. There have been periods in our history that were obvious times when things changed, sometimes quite dramatic, but when is it a reset?
I would say, if things change under false pretenses and not with the well-being of the common people in mind, you can call it a reset.
I can agree with that, and that means that we have to take a closer look at those changes, and see what the consequences for the common people really were, step in their shoes and look through their eyes. But even then we can be fooled, because if people believed that it was all for the common good, they may have been happy about it, because they were brainwashed into the propaganda narrative.
What kind of changes did you find?
Well, because of my approach, making these movies about these cities, it turned into a journey, through time and through the country, and because I made similar movies in the same format for every city, patterns start to emerge. If you study the history of every city, they all tell their own story, but when you look at all of them, you start to see the bigger picture. I tried to create a timeline, and then a lot became clear. I'll give you the short version. Let's start with the Romans. Our history goes back much further, but from Roman times we have records, from earlier times we have only archaeological remains. In those days the Roman Empire reached until the River Rhine. So, what we now call the Netherlands, was split in two parts, the south was Roman and the north was Frisian, and a few other tribes. We still find Roman remains in cities, all along the river, until the coast of the North Sea. According to the official story, the Roman Empire ended around the year 400, but it didn't just end, it slowly crumbled over a long period until what was left finally collapsed. After that, the Middle Ages started, and they are very mysterious because we are supposed to believe that it was a dark period with a lot of wars between all kinds of kingdoms, because of the power vacuum that existed after the fall of the Roman Empire.
There is a theory that there is a 1000 years added to our timeline, because a lot of old coins or buildings with dates on it start with an I or J, instead of a 1. That would mean the Middle Ages never happened and we would live in the year 1022 right now. What's your opinion on that?
You just mentioned all the evidence I could find for that theory, the I or J, that's it. If that is all there is, it tells me that it's just a theory without any substantial proof. At the other hand, there are thousands of cathedrals, churches, abbeys and castles that were built in that period all over the world, and a lot of them are still standing, or at least the ruins are still visible. So if you want to believe that the Middle Ages never happened, then you have to go for the I and J and ignore an immense amount of evidence that it did happen. Stones don't lie.
But some argue that the dates are all changed and that all those buildings are not as old as they tell us.
That would mean that we have to place the Gothic period somewhere in the Renaissance or even later, and that doesn't make any sense at all. It's much more logic if you place it in the Middle Ages, those were the Christian times when religion was more powerful than the kings. The time of the Crusades, and there is a lot mysterious about all that. Why do we call it dark? And why do we call it the Middle Ages in the first place? The history books tell us that life was primitive, there was famine and diseases, Europe was disorganized, and mankind did not make a lot of progress. But at the same time we built all these amazing buildings with stunning architecture, decorated with paintings, statues and a lot of gold. So if you are looking for a mystery, here you have one, but dismissing it as if it never happened, sounds to me as erasing history, and as I said before, that is how you erase identity, it smells like cancel culture.
You have a point there. If we dismiss it, we would never investigate the mystery you just mentioned.
Exactly. If you look at what the scientists tell us about the climate at that time, it turns out that there were very long and hot periods, with a lot of droughts for years on end. Why would you call that the Dark Ages? What if it was the other way around? Could it be that it was the 1000-year reign of Christ as predicted in the Bible? It started when the Roman Empire accepted Christianity, and it ended 1000 years later when the Renaissance started. Why would anyone want to dismiss that? Or maybe I should ask, who would benefit from erasing that from our history books? And that brings us to the next question. The Renaissance is next from 1400 until 1600. Renaissance means revival or rebirth. The Renaissance of what? Of Roman times and Roman style. And also the revival of old Greek philosophers. By the way, these old Greek philosophy manuscripts were all recovered in this period, and they were all found in old abbeys spread over Europe. That seems a bit odd. So, there is the next big change, first the end of the Roman Empire and the start of the Christian Gothic times, and 1,000 years later the end of the Gothic times and the start of the Renaissance.
So did we have peaceful and glorious times after all, or do you think those were resets?
That depends how you look at it. I don't think that the common people had a lot to say about it, but they might have been happy about it. They probably saw it as progress, and a time with a much promising future in both occasions. But let's look at the first change first. First it were the Romans who were in charge in a big part of Europe, but in those days they only controlled the cities to a certain extent. Outside the cities there was not a lot of control. That means that people could live in their own communities with their traditions and culture. After that, Europe was ruled by many kings and counts and dukes, but all these royal houses were connected, because they all marry each other. And all these kings and nobles answer to one bigger power, the Vatican in Rome. So Rome is still in control, and even better than ever before, because from then on there were churches built in every village, and everyone is taught to think and believe the same and accept the same rules and standards. When you didn't obey, you were excluded. You can call that mind control and a reset, ending in cancel culture. The end of spiritual freedom, and the end of free thinking. The local pastor or priest told you what to think and believe, and to behave according to the rules of Rome. If you look at it like that, it doesn't sound like the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Unfortunately, we will never be able to prove any of these visions, unless there is some hidden archive opening up. Maybe if we could dig deep in the cellars of the Smithsonian Institute.
Do I have to put on my pink glasses to survive this interview? What about the Renaissance? Was that also a reset controlled by some dark forces?
No, you don't need your pink glasses. All you have to do is open your eyes and see the beauty of it all. All those old buildings are stunningly beautiful, real craftsmanship, from another level. But yes, the Renaissance was another reset, if we consider our definition of a reset. A lot of the Gothic culture was demolished, or renovated as we like to call it, what means that many old wall paintings were covered up with plaster, sculptures removed or replaced with more modern ones, and all kinds of elements added to the buildings. That's how you change a narrative, and repurpose buildings for other means. In those days there was a lot of resistance against the New Age movement from that time, and again the common people did not have to say a lot about it. It was considered extravagant, even kitsch, and unholy. And again, the Roman Empire lasted for 1,000 years, and the Gothic period also lasted 1,000 years, and then it is time for a big change, because the reign of the Vatican was crumbling. There was division within the church and they needed a new direction. That opened the door for new ideas, new art and architecture, and it resulted in prosperous times. It was also the time of the explorers, discovering new worlds, expanding out of Europe, and sending missionaries all over the world. But again, it was one more step away from our fundamental roots, away from nature. One more step away from real spirituality. On one hand it gave us incredible art and architecture, but at the other hand it was our final disconnection from nature. From then on people believed that humans were not part of nature, we were above it.
Almost all of your videos start in the late 1500s, that's the end of the Renaissance. Why is that?
Because it's hard to find something that is authentic and older than that. Almost everything that you can find, from before that period, is a story that someone is telling and therefore it is bias. I was looking for authentic material, and just show it, so that you can make up your own mind instead of listening to an old story that you cannot verify, and the oldest things I found are maps. The renderings are a bit younger, and from around 1850 we have photos. We can only speculate about the earlier periods that we just discussed, because even the scarce amount of records that we have are written down by someone and therefore bias, but from the late 1500s, there is still evidence that we can study ourselves.
You said you found patterns. What kind of patterns?
First of all, the maps get ugly over time. The oldest maps are the most beautiful, the most detailed and decorated. Maps from the 1800s and later show only squares where the houses are, and in the old maps all the houses and prominent buildings are drawn in the maps in great detail and they are very precise. When you overlap them with modern maps, you can see it's a perfect match. That makes me wonder how they did it, with a bird's eye view but no way to fly and see it from that perspective. Why would you even make a map with that perspective? It makes me wonder if they already used balloons in the 1500s. In any case, it tells you something about the mindset of the people at that time, and the difference with our current mindset. I see no progress there. Second, in the 1500s most of these cities had walls around them, and canals around the walls. That means these cities were already there for quite a long time, because you don't build that overnight. Third, this country was formed in 1581, almost all European countries were formed in that period, and then you see the cities change. In the 1600s almost all of them transformed into star cities. The official narrative is that it was necessary, because of the invention of gunpowder, and the old walls could not resist cannon fire. That's why they built stronger walls with earth ramparts in front of them, and with these star points as strategic platforms for their own cannons to defend the city. That sounds plausible, but it's also telling. Although the country was united, there was not a lot of control outside the cities, and every city had to defend itself if necessary. Fourth, in the early 1800s all these walls are torn down, and again, that is strange. All these cities had walls around them for ages, and suddenly, we decided we didn't need to be able to defend them anymore. I can't find any sound explanation for that. Fifth, in the 1800s and 1900s you see the population numbers explode, and the cities grow far beyond their former walls. That is strange too. Food production moved outside the city, factories moved in, and the cities were overcrowded. The official narrative says that the Industrial Revolution provided us with more prosperity and a better living standard, and that should cause population growth, but the evidence shows the opposite. There was a lot of poverty, child labor, people worked at least 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, under very poor circumstances, and earned very little. Before the Industrial Revolution, people were taking care of themselves. If you look at the old maps, you see how well organized it looked, with a lot of gardens inside and outside the cities, where people grew their food. But from the late 1800s onwards, you could not survive without money to buy food anymore. Those are major changes every 200 years, and they all look like resets to me. First from Gothic to Renaissance in 1400, then from county to country with a central government and star cities in 1600, and then the Industrial Revolution, cities without walls and a major population increase in 1800. In the official narrative they call it progress, but I see only progress in technology, and a decrease in skills, craftsmanship, art and food production. From the 1800s onwards, it's all about economy, the elite getting richer, and the common people are reduced to workforce.
Hold on. The 17th century was our golden age. If that was a reset, it must have been a very positive reset.
It was, in a way, but we have to look at it from a bigger perspective to see how that happened. We became a nation and that solved internal conflicts, but we also established the VOC, the Dutch East India Company, and we started to colonize huge areas all over the world, and even more small settlements in other places. I'll attend that subject in a later video, but my point is that most of that prosperity was imported, it came from abroad, and it boosted our economy. We became the richest country in the world, and that also meant that we could raise more taxes to pay for all that infrastructure like city walls and canals and roads. With the establishment of the VOC, we also invented the insurance company, investment company, stock trading, the stock exchange and banking as we know it today. That turned out to be a success, and other countries soon followed with similar systems. It became the foundation of our whole economic system as we know it today, and we prospered from it for more than 100 years, but always at the cost of other indigenous people in other places in the world, and in the late 1700s that system didn't work very well anymore and had to be reformed. The VOC went bankrupt and the Dutch state confiscated all their assets. And that is the most questionable period in our history. Nothing in the official narrative adds up. I wrote extensively about that in my book. The system was based on greed, and when the state took over, the central government became very powerful. Until that time, most of the power was still in the hands of provinces and the cities, and with the start of the Industrial Revolution the whole system became far more destructive, with total disregard for nature, or the well-being of the common people. So, we prospered for a while, and you're right, it was our golden age, but that is confirming what I said earlier, we are not at the peak of our society, that was almost 400 years ago. And even that is superficial, 2000 years ago we might have been better off than ever, in terms of well-being, happiness and freedom. In the last 400 years we went in a downward spiral, in those terms. It may look that we are doing so well now because we have more advanced technology, like computers and smartphones, and we own cars that make us mobile, and we can fly around in airplanes, but all of it is destructive for the environment, and we are living in a rat race that causes loneliness, anxiety, burnout, depression, anger, and there is a lot of poverty too today, what results in even more suffering and also criminality. If that is not enough, we never had such an advanced and extensive healthcare system, but we have also never been as sick as we are today. Half the population has a chronic disease, due to pollution and all of the above.
Okay, that's enough. Don't destroy my beautiful ideas about this country. I want to go back in time once more. When you look at all those beautiful old buildings, the Star City walls and canals, do you think it could all have been done with shuffles and wheelbarrows, hammers and chisels, and horses and buggies, with a huge workforce? I mean, if you look at the population numbers in the 1600s for instance, it is hard to imagine that they could gather a workforce big enough to do the job. And I have also no idea how you should dig a canal, but I know if you dig it deep enough, you run into groundwater, what makes digging with shuffles impossible. In short, how did they do it?
Then I say again, if you don't know, or can't imagine how it was done, that doesn't mean that it is impossible. I think you just presented the view that we have learned in school, but we were technologically far more advanced than we are led to believe. That's what I meant when I said that we lost craftsmanship and skills and basic knowledge. They teach us that it all started with the Industrial Revolution. That was the time when we invented all kinds of machines that made large-scale production possible, but that is only partly true. That didn't just fall from the sky on a Monday morning. Technology developed slowly over time, and we already had a lot of pretty advanced technology in the 1600s. Most was based on simple physics, and used with ingenuity. Let me give you an example. We are famous for our classic Dutch windmills. We are used to see them, we consider them old-fashioned and out-of-date technology. We don't use them anymore, they are just nice for the tourists, and we take them for granted. But if you take a good look at a windmill and the interior, you can only conclude that it is very good engineering, and it takes a lot of skills, knowledge, and craftsmanship to create all that. Just imagine that the whole top of the mill can spin around to turn it into the wind. The whole top is not connected to the foundation, but resting on a big circle of rollers, and you can spin it around with muscle power from just one man. It takes half an hour to spin it around 360 degrees. And that top weighs a few tons, you need a big crane to get it up there. We could do all that in the 1600s, and that is a lot more than horses and buggies. And we did not do it just once, or twice, as something exceptional, no, we had 20,000 of them. That was the level of technology at the time.
Okay, I get the picture. We had skills, we understood physics, it was great engineering, and we used them to grind grain or pump water out of ditches to keep our feet dry, but that still doesn't dig a canal.
That's where we underestimate the quality and inventiveness of the engineering. We could grind enough grain to feed the entire population with it, but most of them were used to pump out water and prevent our lowlands from flooding. But a good windmill, on a windy day, can fill an Olympic swimming pool in about 2 minutes. That is what I call an amazing amount of pumping power. I doubt if our modern windmills can do that.
Are you kidding me? That is a lot of power indeed, but still, how do you use it to dig my canal?
By digging old-fashioned trenches, to drain the water to a bigger trench that leads to the mill, and the mill can pump it to a higher level, and sluice it into a gutter over the dike, into another canal or the river. That's how you can keep the part under construction dry, and make it possible to dig. But I can also show you the principle of a pump, that doesn't need electricity or fuel to power it. It works with simple physics, gravity creating a vacuum, resulting in a sucking force, that you can use to pump water, but also as a sand sucker, and that means you don't have to pump the water out, because you can suck the soil out. I don't think it is possible to make that as powerful as a mill, but it saves you the pumping, and it doesn't need a huge workforce, so it might have been an option that they used.
Well, thank you. At least now I have the feeling that there was also something good about my country.
I told you I would make it up. I will go into old world technology in a later video, and show you more of this. I found some old footage about engineering from around 1900, and that shows what we could do back then, and gives you an idea what came before.
You put things in perspective. Do you think they had electricity or something like free energy in those days?
I'm not sure about that. I'm working on some experiments that I also would like to show in a later video to find out what is possible, and as soon as I have some results, I will share it. But if they had it, it would probably be used on small scale, like in houses, but probably not in an industrial sense, because it's all low voltage and not enough power to operate power tools like windmills can. I won't break that down for you. There might have been free energy. And I hope I just painted a picture of our glory days, that may even be more beautiful than the Tartarian utopia illusion. Our history is beautiful, and people had a very different mindset than we have today. We didn't even talk about all the great Dutch painters from that same period. Watch the videos I made once more, with this in mind, and it shows. Or go out there and find it for yourself, because there is a lot still standing. I think you will look at it with different eyes, and if you can still see the beauty of it, we can learn from it, and it will give you an idea where we could go from here.
That brings us back to the present. Let me round this up with one more question. Today we are again talking about the Great Reset. Do you think they are natural occurring, as a sign of the times, or as evolution, or maybe as a new age idea from the elite who force it upon us? Or is there a controlling force behind the scenes who have been controlling us for centuries?
That is the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? That one is hard to answer because I don't want to tell you a story, a theory, or a philosophy, and I don't want to make claims that I cannot prove. That was not the idea of this channel. I want to stick to the facts that I know, and are verifiable. What I can say with certainty is that our government, our companies, our sports competitions, our education system, every aspect of our society, is a pyramid system, and in a pyramid there are only a very few people at the top, and the winner takes it all. It's impossible to climb the ladder from the bottom to the top. That's like the American dream, you have to be asleep to believe it. It is a class system with a lot of layers. We are used to it, we think that is normal, and we define success by the amount of steps you manage to climb the ladder. And when we are rewarded for one step, we are as happy as a dog with a cookie. We also know that there are a lot of secret societies that are very powerful, and they are also organized in a pyramid structure. If you consider all that, then it becomes logical to think that the whole world is a pyramid structure, and that means there must be a few people at the top controlling everything. And we also know that there are elite bloodlines that go back centuries, and they keep it in the family, because they only marry people from the same class. But when we look at today's world, we can see that everybody is hooked to their smartphones. We hear elite talk about chipping us all, and connecting us all to an AI. They want to control us with digital systems, hack our bodies, and program our brains. Some even claim that we don't even need normal humans anymore, only technologically updated androids, or fully autonomous robots. They want to rule the world with a global government and a new world order. They say that openly. And that brings me to the most important pattern in this whole story. Every change or reset we talked about brought us one step further from our true essence of being human, disconnected from nature. We almost destroyed nature, and we can't survive without it. We are dumbed down, and spiritually almost brain dead. You can see that all around us, or just look on social media. Everyone is searching, but we don't really know what we are looking for, and in fact, we are looking for the essence of our existence. Look at all the coaches, workshops, retreats, attention-seeking, influencers, opinion-spilling. I see a lot of despair and desperation, because we can all feel that the world we live in, and the way we live is not natural. Our bodies and minds are protesting, because nothing really feels right. We feel that we are on the wrong path. Considering all that, makes it likely that there is a controlling force that has been trying to control us for centuries, but don't quote me on that because I can't prove it, and we will probably never know who those people at the top are, because we have never heard of them. The public figures that come to mind are high up, but not at the top. I know that is an ugly idea and hard to accept, because that means that everything you believed in turns out to be fake, and we have been manipulated from the day we were born. But don't despair, because there is hope. That feeling that I just described, and that big search that millions of people are now experiencing, is also the trigger for the Great Awakening. We slowly start to see what the world is really like, and when we do, we can make our own choices about how we want to go forward, each of us. Really connect with our neighbors again, form small communities, grow our own food again, revive some ideas from the past, restore and connect with nature again, and find non-destructive ways to live. If we do that, we become independent and free people again, we can develop true spirituality again, and become whole again. When enough people come out of the illusion that we are living in, we can. And will not be controlled anymore, and it only takes a relative small percentage to reach a critical mass. When we reach that, we will see a major shift, and the control system will fall apart because we slowly replace it for something better, and that is why this is an exciting time to be alive, because I believe we will see it happen in the coming years, and that will make us truly free human beings. When that happens, it will be the greatest reset of all times.
That is a beautiful statement to finish with, and in the meantime, all we can do is stay positive and humble, keep searching, exploring and pioneering to create a better world. Talk about it with other people, and don't judge each other because we were all born into this. I welcome everyone who wants to join us on this journey with open arms. Thank you so much for this enlightening conversation.
Well, thank you. I'm always grateful to have these conversations with you, and I hope we contribute something with it to a better future for everyone.
I'm sure it will. Thank you everyone for listening. We appreciate it when you share this video and please leave a comment. We want to hear your thoughts on this, and I'm looking forward to the next episode. There is so much more to explore. Have a nice day, and take care of each other.